King Nebuchadnezzar II. His reign, marked by military conquests and monumental projects, reflected his ambition to expand and consolidate his empire. Nebuchadnezzar was known for his strategic vision and his ability to inspire both loyalty and fear equally. During that period, Babylon was a Chaldean region rich in cultural and religious diversity. However, Nebuchadnezzar, determined to unify his vast domain under a single authority and symbol of power, made a bold decision. He ordered the construction of a colossal gold statue, intended to be the center of worship and respect throughout the empire. This statue was not just a work of art, it was a declaration of supremacy and absolute control. Imagine the grandeur of the statue erected in the heart of the Babylonian capital. The visible half of the structure shone intensely under the scorching sun, reflecting the wealth and power of the king. The other half disappeared into darkness, suggesting mystery and imposing presence. The statue, made of solid gold, stood at an impressive height rivaling the towers of the most sacred temples. Its eyes seemed to watch every corner of the empire, symbolizing Nebuchadnezzar's constant vigilance over his subjects. The streets leading to the statue were always bustling, with citizens from all parts of the empire walking towards the king's symbol of power. Merchants sold souvenirs, artists performed in homage to the statue, and priests conducted rituals to maintain the king's favor. The statue was not only a religious icon but also a political tool to ensure the loyalty and submission of the people. With the statue completed, Nebuchadnezzar issued an imperial decree that echoed throughout Babylon's vast territory. All inhabitants, from nobles to the humblest workers, were ordered to bow before the gold statue and worship it as the personification of the king's power and divinity. It was a non-negotiable requirement. The worship of the statue was seen as a demonstration of unconditional loyalty to the emperor and the empire. The decree was proclaimed in all languages and understood by everyone, eliminating any possibility of misunderstandings or voluntary disobedience. Public squares, markets, and even private residences were equipped with small altars for the worship of the statue. Those who refused to obey faced severe punishments, ranging from imprisonment to death, depending on the severity of the disobedience. Nebuchadnezzar's decree was not just a religious or political order, it represented the pinnacle of centralized power and the attempt to eliminate any form of dissent or idolatry that could threaten the empire's stability. By demanding the worship of the gold statue, the king sought to culturally unify his vast empire, ensuring that all his subjects shared a single symbol of loyalty and devotion. This decree set the stage for the central conflict of our story. It highlighted the tension between true faith and the imposition of a new worship forced by secular power. This scenario prepared the ground for the test of faith that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would face, demonstrating the struggle between obedience to God and submission to the orders of a tyrannical ruler. If you feel motivated and inspired by this content, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this. We will bring a series of content with biblical teachings and inspiring stories that motivate us to continue, that keep us from giving up. Let's continue with the story. A statue of solid gold erected in a prominent place, serving as the epicenter of worship and royal authority. Nebuchadnezzar's statue was not a simple sculpture, it was a masterpiece of engineering and art, intended to impress and subjugate. The statue reached impressive heights, majestically ascending to the sky, reflecting the sunlight with a dazzling brilliance visible from kilometers away. Every detail was meticulously carved, from the intricate ornaments on the king's garments to the facial expressions that conveyed absolute power and earthly divinity. The statue's hands were extended in a commanding gesture, demanding respect and obedience from all who beheld it. The Babylonian artisans, known for their unparalleled skill, worked tirelessly under Nebuchadnezzar's direct orders. Forges blazed with molten metal's heat, hammers and chisels rhythmically creating a symphony of creation, as workers carved each detail with divine precision. The gold, extracted from the richest mines in the region, was carefully molded and polished to achieve perfect shine, symbolizing the empire's wealth and opulence. As the statue took shape, its presence began to transform the urban landscape. The streets leading to it were paved with precious stones and surrounded by lush gardens, creating a path worthy of such a powerful monarch. Each passing day made the statue more imposing, reflecting Nebuchadnezzar's determination to consolidate his legacy and perpetuate his dominance. The gold statue was not just a symbol of political power, it represented the idolatry imposed by the king and the deliberate attempt to divert his people from true faith in God. Nebuchadnezzar, by erecting this grand work, sought to unify his vast empire under a single symbol of worship, eliminating any other beliefs that could challenge his authority. Every aspect of the statue was carefully designed to convey messages of supremacy and control. Gold, a metal that shines intensely and is highly valued, symbolized the wealth and splendor of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. The statue's towering height represented the king's boundless ambition and his intention to govern absolutely, leaving no room for dissent or alternative religions. Furthermore, the statue served as a constant reminder of the king's presence in every aspect of the citizens' lives. Its piercing gaze seemed to watch every action, every thought, reinforcing the idea that loyalty to the king was essential for survival and prosperity within the empire. This imposition of worship towards the statue sought to replace devotion to God with exclusive devotion to the earthly ruler, creating an inevitable conflict for those who maintained their unwavering faith. The statue's symbolism also reflected Nebuchadnezzar's attempt to equate himself with the deities his subjects worshipped. By demanding that everyone bow before a statue representing his own image, the king was, in a way, declaring himself a living deity, above any celestial power. This arrogance and direct imposition of worship served to strengthen his control over the empire, but also sowed the seeds of spiritual resistance that would manifest in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The construction of the statue generated a complex mix of reactions among the Babylonian people. For many, it was a symbol of national pride and prosperity, representing the glory of an empire that seemed invincible. The elites and court officials embraced the statue as a testament to Nebuchadnezzar's wisdom and power, seeing in it a reflection of their own aspirations and achievements. However, for those who maintained true faith in God, the statue represented a direct threat to their spirituality and identity. Laws mandating the worship of the statue placed these believers in a distressing dilemma: obey the king's demands or remain loyal to their religious beliefs. This growing tension created an environment of fear and uncertainty, where loyalty to God became an act of courage and resistance against oppression. Conversations in markets and squares reflected this division. While some celebrated the statue's grandeur, others whispered silent prayers, seeking strength to maintain their faith in the face of the king's impositions. The gold statue, therefore, was not just a monumental artwork but also a catalyst for internal and external conflicts, preparing the ground for the challenges the three young men would face in their journey of faith and courage. With the magnificent gold statue erected in the heart of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar sought to further consolidate his power and influence over his vast empire. To achieve this, he issued a decree that echoed through all the streets, squares, and homes of the city. In a grand announcement proclaimed by royal messengers, the king ordered all inhabitants of Babylon to bow before the gold statue at a specific time of day, marking a new era of mandatory worship of the ruler. Imagine walking through the bustling Babylonian streets. The messengers, dressed in richly adorned tunics, traversed the avenues announcing the decree. At every corner, men, women, and children listened attentively to the king's orders. The call to worship was not just a suggestion but an imperial requirement, backed by Nebuchadnezzar's unquestionable authority. In public squares, where merchants sell their goods and artists perform to entertain the crowds, citizens were forced to interrupt their daily activities to participate in the worship. Altars were erected at each gathering place, and designated priests supervised the rituals, ensuring that everyone complied with the king's orders without hesitation. The imposition of worship towards the gold statue brought immense pressure, both social and political. For many, the decision to obey the decree meant demonstrating loyalty and respect to the king, securing their position and favor within Babylonian society. Those who bowed before the statue were seen as exemplary, obedient citizens, while those who resisted faced not only the king's wrath but also social ostracism. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, however, this requirement presented an unbearable dilemma. As faithful followers of God, they knew that worshipping any deity other than the true Lord would be a direct violation of divine commandments. This choice between obeying human laws or remaining loyal to their faith created a profound internal tension, placing them in an extremely difficult position. In homes and communities, whispers of fear and uncertainty spread. Families torn between loyalty to the king and devotion to God sought advice and mutual support. Some chose to follow the decree to avoid severe punishments, while others, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, chose to resist, trusting in divine protection even in the face of the most terrible threats. Social pressure also manifested in the workplace and personal relationships. In government and artisan workshops, those who refused to worship the statue faced discrimination, job loss, and even persecution. Friends and co-workers were forced to choose sides, creating an atmosphere of distrust and constant fear. The story of these three young men highlights the universal conflict between obedience to earthly authorities and fidelity to spiritual precepts. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were aware of the consequences of their decision, but their unwavering faith in God sustained them. They understood that despite overwhelming pressure, their devotion to the true Lord was more important than any human decree. This courageous choice deeply resonated with those facing similar dilemmas. The narrative emphasized the importance of maintaining spiritual integrity even amid adversity, inspiring viewers to reflect on their own beliefs and values in the face of external pressures. As the appointed day for worship approached, tension in Babylon increased. The streets, once vibrant and full of life, were now marked by an atmosphere of apprehension. Preparations for the grand event were evident in every detail: decorated altars, vigilant guards, and the anticipation of a large crowd gathered to witness devotion to the king. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, this period was one of intense prayer and reflection. They met in secret, strengthening their resolve and seeking divine support to face the impending challenge. Their prayers were a testament to faith and courage, demonstrating that regardless of circumstances, their loyalty to God remained unshakable. Do you feel any similarity between the moment you live and the story told? Do you feel you are experiencing something similar? Tell us how you feel. If you need a prayer or help, share a story of overcoming to inspire us and give us strength not to give up. Comment if you want to help someone or need help. On the day appointed for mandatory worship of the gold statue, the atmosphere in Babylon was charged with tension and expectation. The streets, once vibrant, were now the stage for watchful gazes and anxious whispers. While most inhabitants prepared to comply with the royal decree, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego found themselves at a crucial decision point. Imagine the three young men gathered in a discreet location, away from the watchful eyes of the king's messengers. Twilight began to paint the sky with shades of orange and purple, reflecting the gravity of the situation. Each was dressed simply, contrasting with the opulence of the gold statue dominating the city. Their faces showed a mix of determination and serenity, evidencing the depth of their faith. "We must obey the king and worship the statue," said one of the close advisors, trying to persuade them to yield to social and political pressure. But Shadrach, with firm eyes and a resolute heart, responded, "Our God is the Lord, and to him we owe our loyalty and worship. We cannot betray our principles out of fear of consequences." Meshach added, "Even if we face death, our faith in God sustains us. He is our refuge and fortress, and we will not fear what may happen to us." Abednego, the youngest, concluded with a voice full of conviction, "We are in this decision together. God is with us, and he will guide us." With these words, the three young men reaffirmed their decision to resist the idolatry imposed by Nebuchadnezzar. Their courage was not born of rebellion, but of unwavering faith and a deep commitment to divine commandments. They knew this choice would put them in direct conflict with the king, but they were willing to face any adversity to remain faithful to God. Their motivation went beyond fear or hope for divine protection. It was a pure expression of love and obedience to God, a natural response to their faith and trust in the true Lord. From a young age, the three had been taught divine precepts, learning the importance of worshiping only God and diligently following his commandments. This spiritual education shaped their hearts and minds, making them resilient in the face of any challenge that threatened their devotion. In the nights leading up to the decree, they gathered in prayer and meditation, seeking strength and divine guidance. "Lord, grant us the courage to remain faithful to you, regardless of the consequences," prayed Shadrach, feeling God's comforting presence in every word. Meshach and Abednego repeated the same plea, finding solace in the certainty that they were not alone. This spiritual motivation was fueled by their personal experiences with God. Each had witnessed moments where the divine hand guided and protected them, reinforcing their trust in the Lord's power and goodness. They knew their faith was not based on temporary circumstances, but on a deep and enduring relationship with God. Their determination also reflected a clear understanding of divine commandments. They knew that worshiping any deity other than God was a direct violation of the precepts they had sworn to follow. This moral clarity drove them to act with integrity, even when external pressure threatened to destabilize their convictions. Additionally, the vision of a future where their faith was strengthened and they could witness God's glory in an even more powerful way served as an additional incentive. They believed their resistance would not only protect their spiritual integrity but also serve as an inspiring testament to others, demonstrating that true faith can triumph over any adversity. One of the most powerful elements of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's courage was the unity they shared. In an environment of fear and uncertainty, their close bond and mutual commitment were constant sources of strength and encouragement. They knew they would face great dangers together, and this awareness further solidified their bond. The trust they placed in each other created an unbreakable support network, allowing each to rise during moments of doubt and weakness. Together, they formed an invincible trio, driven by faith and friendship. "We are not alone in this journey," said Meshach, reminding them of the divine promise that God would be with them. "Our faith unites and strengthens us. With God on our side, we can face any challenge." This unity not only sustained them emotionally, but also spiritually and mentally. They shared their hopes, fears, and prayers, creating an environment of trust where each could express their vulnerabilities without judgment. This transparency and openness further reinforced their collective determination, turning every challenge into an opportunity for spiritual growth and strengthened faith. As the day for worship approached, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego prepared for what they knew would be an unprecedented test of faith. They engaged in intense prayers and deep meditations, seeking clarity and strength to face the impending adversity. Each reflected on God's words and teachings, finding inspiration in stories of other faithful individuals who faced similar challenges with bravery and devotion. This reflection helped them stay focused on their spiritual goal, distancing themselves from distractions and the temptation to succumb to fear. They also engaged in spiritual preparation practices, such as fasting and days of silence, to purify their minds and hearts. This spiritual discipline not only strengthened their faith, but also mentally prepared them for the trial that was to come. Additionally, they shared moments of encouragement and reaffirmed their commitment to God and to each other. "Regardless of what happens, our faith will remain firm," said Shadrach, reaffirming the conviction that united them. "God is our strength and our salvation." This preparation was not just a religious routine, but an act of profound meaning and purpose. They knew they were about to face a decisive moment and wanted to be fully prepared to honor their faith authentically and integrally. The day of mandatory worship of the gold statue finally arrived. The streets of Babylon were filled with citizens gathered around the altars, ready to comply with Nebuchadnezzar's decree. However, when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow, the atmosphere of reverence was replaced by a tense silence and a charged sense of expectation. Nebuchadnezzar, observing the scene attentively from his elevated position, felt his fury grow with each passing moment. The young men's disobedience was not just a refusal to worship the statue, it was a direct challenge to his authority and the control he wielded over the empire. His expression, once majestic, now reflected anger and unwavering determination. Imagine the king sitting on his throne, his royal garments reflecting the opulence of his power. His eyes, usually full of sovereignty, now burned with indignation. He rose abruptly, his steps echoing through the palace's main hall, while advisors and officials watched apprehensively. Every movement of the king conveyed the seriousness of the situation and the imminence of a severe response. "I have never seen such insolence in my kingdom," declared Nebuchadnezzar in an authoritative voice, his tone echoing through the palace walls. "These three young men dishonor the emperor's order and the worship that has been commanded. They challenge not only me but the divine order that sustains my reign." Nebuchadnezzar's anger knew no bounds. He ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him, surrounded by his officials and guards. The crowd watched with a mix of fear and curiosity, knowing that the consequences for the disobedient would be severe. Without hesitation, Nebuchadnezzar issued a clear and irrevocable order: "Take these three young men and throw them into the burning furnace. Let them serve as an example to all who dare to disobey my orders." The officials, obedient and fearful of the king's wrath, did not question the order. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were bound with heavy chains, ensuring they could not escape or resist. The crowd watched in silence, some murmuring in despair, others in shock at the cruelty of the punishment. The burning furnace, already prepared for this moment, seemed like a fire monster waiting to engulf the young men. The flames danced menacingly, illuminating the determined faces of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The intense heat emanated from the furnace, creating an almost insurmountable barrier between the three young men and the certainty of death. Nebuchadnezzar, determined to showcase his authority and the power of his decree, ordered the furnace to be lit with all its might. The flames quickly grew, consuming the surrounding air and emitting a bright glow that reflected in the king's eyes. The temperature inside the furnace rose to unbearable levels, and the sound of the crackling fire filled the environment with a sense of imminent danger. As the officials threw the young men into the furnace, the crowd held its breath. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, despite the terror of the moment, remained steadfast in their faith. Their silent prayers and unwavering trust in God sustained them in the face of extreme adversity. The king, watching from afar, could hardly believe what he saw. Fear, fury, and helplessness mixed within him, for despite all the power he possessed, something inexplicable was happening before his eyes. The crowd, witnessing the dramatic scene, was divided in their reactions. Some, intimidated by Nebuchadnezzar's display of power, began to doubt the king's justice. Others, loyal to the monarch, watched in horror and disbelief, unable to understand how three young men could challenge his authority without suffering the expected consequences. The streets of Babylon, once full of life and daily activities, were now steeped in heavy silence, interrupted only by the sounds of fire and the young men's silent prayers. The tension was palpable, reflecting the magnitude of the moment and the profound impact it would have on all present. Nebuchadnezzar, despite his anger, felt a shadow of doubt creeping into his heart. What was happening inside the furnace defied his understanding and the logic of his power. He watched attentively, expecting to see the young men succumb to the flames, but a strange feeling left him uneasy. Leave a like if you are enjoying this, so YouTube continues to recommend videos like this, helping and motivating us to continue. We appreciate every second, and may God bless you. The burning furnace, prepared in advance for this severe punishment, was an imposing structure of clay bricks and metal, designed to withstand extreme temperatures. In the heart of Babylon, the chosen site for throwing the young men was surrounded by a silent, anxious, and fearful crowd of onlookers. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were bound and led to the furnace, the intense heat was already beginning to escalate. The uncontrollable flames danced fiercely, casting red and orange reflections that illuminated the surrounding threatening darkness. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the loud sound of crackling fire, creating an atmosphere of imminent danger that made everyone's hearts race faster. The furnace was not just an ordinary oven. It was a symbol of Nebuchadnezzar's absolute power and his determination to crush any form of resistance. The inner walls glowed with heat, and the flames leapt high, seeming to want to consume everything around them. The external darkness contrasted with the fire's intensity, creating an almost apocalyptic scene that made everyone present feel the weight of the situation. The guards and officials watched attentively, knowing that any failure in execution could result in unpredictable consequences. The expressions of those present varied between fear and indignation, reflecting the gravity of the moment. It was a scene that captured the essence of power and tyranny, where the lives of the faithful were being judged in a cruel and merciless manner. Despite the threatening environment and the flames that seemed to inch closer with each passing second, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego maintained a posture of firmness and serenity. Their eyes gleamed with unwavering confidence, reflecting the depth of their faith in God. Even in the face of the scorching fire, they showed no signs of fear or despair, conveying a powerful message of courage and hope. Shadrach, the eldest of the trio, looked at his companions and said in a firm voice, "We do not fear the consequences of our decision, for we know that God is with us." Meshach and Abednego nodded, sharing the same determination and conviction. Their silent prayers and calm smiles revealed a deep trust in divine deliverance, showing that their faith transcended immediate fear. As they were thrown into the furnace, The intense heat seemed to envelop their bodies, but their souls remained cool and steadfast in devotion to God. The flames licked their clothes but left no visible marks, signaling that something extraordinary was happening. The crowd watched in silence, unable to comprehend how 3 young men could remain unharmed in the face of such adversity. Inside the furnace, the heat was suffocating, and the flames seemed to want to engulf the young men, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego remained calm and united. Their hands were intertwined, and their faces showed a peace that contrasted with the fire's ferocity around them. It was as if an invisible barrier protected them, allowing them to stay firm in their faith despite the extreme conditions. The young men's attitude did not go unnoticed. Nebuchadnezzar watched from afar, his anger now mixed with growing confusion and admiration. As a powerful king, he expected to see his subjects succumb to the fire, but the unwavering resistance of the 3 young men defied his expectations and absolute control. In the midst of the intense flames, when all seemed lost, something extraordinary happened. A 4th being, a divine manifestation, appeared inside the furnace. It was a luminous and serene presence that contrasted with the surrounding heat and destruction. The flames encircling the young men began to lessen, and a supernatural calm settled over the area. The divine presence not only protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego but also demonstrated God's direct intervention on behalf of his faithful servants. The fire, which had seemed uncontrollable, now obeyed a higher force, allowing the young men to remain unharmed. The crowd, witnessing this miracle, was stunned and speechless, recognizing that something beyond their understanding was occurring. The divine presence brought a sense of peace and security to the young men, reinforcing their faith and courage. They knew they were not alone and that God was truly with them, protecting them and answering their prayers miraculously. This manifestation not only saved their lives physically but also strengthened their faith, making them even more inspiring to those who watched them. Nebuchadnezzar, observing from afar, felt his anger transform into perplexity. How was it possible that his guards and officials, highly trained to carry out his orders, could not harm the young men despite his decree? The logic of his power seemed to crumble before the miracle unfolding in the burning furnace. As the flames of the burning furnace intensified, the atmosphere around Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was filled with suffocating heat and the loud sounds of crackling fire. The crowd watched with wide eyes, fearing the worst, while King Nebuchadnezzar awaited, anxious to witness the outcome of his severe order. However, at the height of the tension, something extraordinary happened. Amidst the violent flames, a luminous and serene figure emerged, distinct from the furious flames surrounding the young men. This 4th being, whose presence exuded an aura of tranquility and power, emanated a radiant light that contrasted with the threatening darkness of the furnace. It was as if an invisible barrier had been erected around Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, protecting them from the relentless fire. The figure seemed imbued with divine strength, reflecting the majesty and holiness of God. The eyes of the 4th being shone with an intensity that conveyed both authority and compassion. The flames, which had previously threatened to consume the young men, now calmed and receded, obeying the sacred presence interceding on their behalf. The crowd, witnessing this miracle, was left speechless. The sound of the fire was muted, and a supernatural calm enveloped the environment. It was impossible to deny the power of the divine manifestation before the unbelieving eyes of all present. The 4th being remained beside the young men, ensuring their protection and demonstrating that something beyond human understanding was occurring. The presence of the 4th being in the furnace was not just a display of power, but also a testament to God's love and protection for his faithful. This supernatural act revealed God's ability to intervene directly in the most desperate situations, offering deliverance and salvation in ways that transcend human logic. While the 4th being remained with the young men, the burning furnace ceased to represent a threat of death and became a symbol of divine intervention in favor of true faith. The flames that had once seemed uncontrollable now obeyed divine will, allowing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to remain unharmed and intact despite the extreme conditions. Nebuchadnezzar, watching the miracle before his eyes, felt his anger and disbelief turn into perplexity and admiration. He realized that the power he believed he controlled was not absolute, and that a higher force was inexplicably protecting the young men. His authority, which had seemed invincible until then, was now questioned by the manifestation of divine power. The supernatural intervention not only saved the three young men's lives, but also served as a powerful declaration that fidelity to God transcends any earthly authority. This miracle was a living testament that God is present and active in the lives of those who follow Him with sincerity and courage, protecting and guiding them even in the most challenging circumstances. The crowd, once divided in their reactions, now witnessed a miracle that united everyone in admiration and respect. Many began to question their own beliefs and reflect on the true power they were observing. The appearance of the fourth divine being transformed fear and tension into reverence and recognition of divine supremacy. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, emerging from the furnace unharmed, were received with a mixture of relief and astonishment. Their clothes were not burned, and their expressions reflected the peace and unwavering trust in God that sustained them throughout the faith test. They left the furnace as living witnesses of divine power and protection, inspiring those who observed them to reconsider their own beliefs and recognize the true source of power and salvation. As the divine manifestation intensified within the furnace, the crowd watched in absolute silence, unable to comprehend what was happening. The flames, once threatening and fierce, now receded under the influence of the celestial presence protecting Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The heat, which had promised to consume the young men, seemed to dissipate, and a supernatural calm settled over the environment. After a few moments that felt like an eternity, the flames finally diminished to the point of no longer posing a threat. The officials and guards, initially apprehensive and scared, began to look at each other in disbelief. How was it possible that three young men remained unharmed inside the burning furnace? The logic of human power was being inexplicably challenged. Nebuchadnezzar, observing from a safe distance, could barely contain his curiosity mixed with a growing sense of admiration. With a look of skepticism slowly turning into astonishment, he ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be removed from the furnace. The officials, still trembling from the traumatic experience, helped the young men out, but to everyone's surprise, the three emerged completely unharmed. Their clothes showed no signs of burns, and they appeared as healthy and vigorous as before being thrown into the fire. The crowd, witnessing this miracle, was left speechless. Murmurs of admiration and disbelief quickly spread among those present. People who once looked on with fear now looked with reverence, recognizing that something extraordinary had occurred. The three young men, still united and serene, walked towards the main square, where Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue stood imposing. The guards, unable to understand what they had just witnessed, remained silent, unable to offer any logical explanation for what had happened. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, with calm faces and expressions of deep faith, remained intact not only physically but also spiritually, evidencing the divine protection that had saved them. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego exited the furnace, the crowd was still in a state of shock, but the calm and integrity of the young men began to foster a new understanding among those present. Nebuchadnezzar, still trying to process what he had witnessed, approached the trio with a mixture of respect and admiration in his eyes. He knelt before them, an attitude reflecting his submission to the divine power he had just witnessed. With a voice full of reverence and acknowledgement, Nebuchadnezzar declared, "I, Nebuchadnezzar, recognize today that the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is powerful and real. He saved these young men from the burning furnace, and I am compelled to honor and worship him." Nebuchadnezzar's declaration reverberated throughout the main square, reaching every corner of the Babylonian Empire. It was a public acknowledgement of God's supremacy, challenging the imposed idolatry and affirming the true faith of the three young men. The gold statue, a symbol of human power and the attempt to divert the people from true faith, now served as a reminder of the divine power's superiority. With this, Nebuchadnezzar ordered that worship of the gold statue be immediately suspended. He promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to high positions of authority within the empire, recognizing not only their loyalty but also God's strength and protection in their lives. This promotion was not just an act of gratitude, but also a way to ensure that the message of fidelity and supernatural deliverance was widely disseminated throughout the empire. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego became a living testimony to the importance of maintaining faith in God above all circumstances. Their courage and unwavering trust in God inspired not only those who observed them but also future generations to uphold their faith, even in the face of the most extreme adversities. The message that God is present and active in the lives of those who follow Him sincerely and courageously was powerfully and indelibly reinforced. The crowd, now united in praise and admiration, began to celebrate the witnessed miracle. Priests and religious leaders began to preach about God's greatness, and people turned to true faith with renewed hope and devotion. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego spread quickly, becoming a legend of faith and resilience that would continue to inspire and strengthen the faith of many for centuries to come. After the impressive release of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the burning furnace, the city of Babylon was in reverent silence. The flames that once threatened to consume the young men had become silent witnesses to a divine miracle. The manifestation of the fourth being and the preservation of the three men left an indelible mark on everyone's memory who witnessed the event. Nebuchadnezzar, the proud and powerful king, found himself facing a reality that challenged his understanding and authority. The grandeur of his empire, symbolized by the gold statue, now competed with the invisible and supreme power of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God. This confrontation was not just between a king and three young men, but between the man-imposed idolatry and true faith in God. The story of these three young men powerfully illustrates the importance of maintaining faith in God above all circumstances. Even in the face of certain death threats and a hostile environment, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego chose to follow divine precepts instead of yielding to the social and political pressures imposed by the king. Their decision not to bow before the gold statue was an act of courage and obedience. They understood that their loyalty to God was more valuable and meaningful than any earthly life or position of power. This choice reflects the essence of true faith, unwavering trust in God, even when facing seemingly insurmountable adversities. Divine intervention in the burning furnace is a clear demonstration of God's power to save and protect His faithful in supernatural ways. The fourth being, a divine manifestation, not only protected the young men from the fire, but also served as a visible sign of God's power before the entire Babylonian nation. This miracle reinforces the message that God is attentive and active in the lives of those who sincerely follow Him. He is capable of performing deliverances that defy natural laws and human logic, showing that His power transcends any earthly force. God's protection over Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is a living testament that faith in God can transform impossible situations into surprising victories. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is not just a historical account. It is a continuous source of inspiration for all generations. It reminds us that, regardless of the challenges we face, our fidelity to God can lead us to extraordinary deliverances. This narrative encourages us to maintain our spiritual integrity and fully trust in God's power, even when circumstances seem desperate. Moreover, Nebuchadnezzar's transformation, from an arrogant king to an admirer of the young men's God, highlights the impact our fidelity can have on those around us. Our commitment to God can inspire positive changes and foster a deeper understanding of true divine power. In a world where social, political, and cultural pressures often challenge our faith, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego teaches us valuable lessons about resistance and trust in God. In moments of conflict, remember that our fidelity to God must always come first. Just like the young men, we must choose to obey divine precepts, even when facing difficult consequences. When confronted with seemingly insurmountable challenges, maintain the trust that God is with us and capable of delivering us in ways we cannot foresee. The story encourages us to act with courage and integrity, even when society or authorities try to divert us from our spiritual principles. Our commitment to God can positively influence those around us, just as the faith of the three young men impacted Nebuchadnezzar and all of Babylon. The narrative reinforces the importance of maintaining hope and resilience, knowing that God is a constant source of strength and protection. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is a powerful testament to unwavering faith and God's ability to perform supernatural deliverances for those who trust in Him. Their courage to remain faithful, even in the face of death threats, and the divine intervention that saved them from a fiery furnace inspire us to maintain our own fidelity to God, regardless of circumstances. This account not only highlights the importance of prioritizing our relationship with God, but also demonstrates the transformative power of His presence in our lives. It reminds us that with faith and trust, we can overcome any adversity, knowing that God is always with us, ready to protect and guide us towards victory. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego teaches us about the importance of maintaining faith in God above all circumstances and demonstrates God's power to perform supernatural deliverances for those who trust in Him. Their faith and courage serve as an inspiring example for all of us, reminding us that even in the most challenging situations, God is present to save and strengthen us. Thank you for watching until here, and don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell to see more content like this and stories of overcoming, motivational, and interesting. Until next time.